In this next exercise, we're going to be building a pure CSS accordion window. So these are going to be my accordion tabs, and if we click on these, you can see that it will either close or open the content of the tab that has been clicked. So again, this is going to be done purely with CSS, and there's a lot of different opportunities to style these in different ways and really make some creative web pages. Let's get into the page. I have just barely started building the HTML page, so this is an HTML5 document. The only thing that I've really done inside of the body is made a header with an H1 tag, and I'm linking out to my CSS file, and everything else is pretty much standard. We're going to be building the body section of the website. I'll use a section tag, and inside that section tag I'm going to make an article, and within the article I am going to create an A tag, and my A tag is going to link to the same ID of that particular A tag. So our first one is going to be called overview, and then I'm going to assign an ID and give it that same value of overview. And the text that I want to display within this A tag is going to be an H1, and it will also say overview. The next thing that I want to place on the page after the closing A tag is going to be a paragraph with some lore map, some text, and I am going to place an image inside of the paragraph tag as well. And for the source attribute, I'll go into my images folder, and for this one I'm going to use my O4 ping file, which is a photograph of a fish, and the alt tag is going to just say sea life. And that's going to be it. I will go ahead and just copy this article since I'm going to be using the same format for the remaining 3 articles that I'm going to put on the page. So my second article is going to be about sharks. So I'll change the H1 to say sharks. We are going to change the href value to be hash shark, and the ID will also be shark. And then for the image tag, I'm going to point to my O5 ping file, which is a photograph of a taupe shark, and I'll update the alt tag to say taupe shark. And just to kind of change this up, I'm going to create some different lore map, some text, so the length of this tab can be a little bit different. We'll repeat this one more time. The last article is going to be about turtles, so I will update the href, the ID, and the headline to reflect the information about turtles that I want to display. And I'm going to change my image, I'll change the alt tag, and let's just update the content within the paragraph tag. Okay, so if we save out our page and we go look at what we have so far, the page is going to look like this. Now let's go ahead and create some CSS to format the layout of the page. I'll go into my CSS file, and I'm going to begin by adding a max width on my article, and we'll just set that to 600 pixels. I'm going to make a rule for the images, and for the images we're going to shrink them down a little bit. Again, this isn't best practice, but just for this lesson I needed some images that are a little bit smaller, so I'm going to change their max width to be 50%. I will float these to the left, and I'm going to add some padding on the right. And because I'm shrinking the images down a little bit and sending a max width, I want the subsequent items to clear these pictures. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll make a rule on article : after, and this is going to clear the floats, so we'll use a clear both. Display block and content sent to just empty quotes. And if we save now and we go look at our page in the browser, you can see that each of the articles now clear the previous floats. I really like this technique since it allows you to clear a floated element without having to create any additional HTML elements to use as hooks. We'll set a little bit of margin on the left for our paragraphs, and actually let's put some margin on the bottom as well. We should probably have a rule for the section tag, and I'm going to set the width of the section tag to be 600 pixels. We'll set the margin to be 0 and auto. I'll set my background color to be EA, which is a really light gray. And let's give the section a little bit of a border radius. I'll set that to 5 pixels. And finally, I'm going to add a box shadow. I'm going to save this, and if we go ahead and refresh this, you can now see that I have a little bit of a background color, and I have a little bit of a border shadow at the bottom part of my page. I just have a couple more rules that I want to implement here. I'm going to make some rules on the article H1, and all I really want to do here is adjust the font size. So we'll just change the font size to 1.2 ems. I'm going to make rules for my article A tags, and I'm going to have these display as block. This will allow the whole tab to be clickable, which is going to be a little bit more user-friendly. I'm going to set the height of the tabs to 25 pixels. I'm going to set my line height to be the same amount, 25 pixels. This should center the text in that area. We're going to set the background to be a linear gradient. And I'm just going to pass in some hex values. It's just going to be going from a gray to a slightly darker shade of gray. We'll change the text color to be a really dark gray. And I'm going to remove the text decoration, make that none, so there's no underline. Let's also align the text center in this area. And I'm going to put a little bit of a text shadow on here as well. And for the values, I'm going to use 0, 1 pixel, 0, and I'll use RGBA values. For the color, we're going to set it to a 50% white. And let's just add a border on the bottom of our A tags as well. And this is going to be solid 1 pixel, and I'm going to just pass in a shade of gray. So if we save that and take a quick peek, you can see that my A tags now are going to be this kind of tabbed area like so. So I like the way that's looking. I'm going to make a rule for my overview, and I'm going to set the border radius. So this is going to round the corners of these areas. For this first element, it's going to be 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 0 and 0. For the turtle article, I'm going to set the border radius, and I'm going to use some slightly different values. We're going to use 0, 0, 3 pixels, and 3 pixels. And remember that the turtle is the bottom and the overview is the top. So if we refresh now, you can see that it's going to round the top section of the overview. And if we look down at the bottom of the page, it's also going to round the bottom of the sea turtle section. So I don't want any rounding on the sharks tab, since that's kind of in the middle of what I'm displaying here. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a rule for article A hover, and we're going to set the opacity to 0.8. We're going to set the outline value to none, and let's go ahead and let's just make this a group selector. We'll do article A focus, and that will prevent the outline none is going to prevent that kind of default blue border that you can sometimes see. And then I'll make a rule for article :active, and on the active state we're just going to set the background to a linear gradient. And I'm just going to change the shades of gray slightly. So this is going to change to a slightly like darker shade of gray once the article is active. So when you're clicked on that tab. And let's make the color of the text turn to be blue. Now, to make this work correctly, we're going to be using the target pseudo class. The target pseudo selector in CSS is going to match when the hash in the URL and the ID are the same. Any sort of href value that is going to be a hash followed by the anchor name is going to link to certain elements within the document. So this element that it's linking to is the target element. So we're going to use the target selector to style those elements on our page. So we're going to come back here and we're going to go ahead and we're going to use a selector, I'll put it down here at the bottom, of :target plus P. So this is going to look for any item that has that anchor name and is a target selector, and then we're looking for the paragraphs that follow. So this is going to find any paragraphs that follow, and we're going to go ahead and set the padding of these items, and we'll add 10 pixels and 15 pixels. So this will be a little bit more specific selector. It'll overwrite any sort of regular paragraphs, which we don't really have in our document, but just in case we did. Then I'm going to use overview :target plus P, and we're going to set a height value in here. So the height value, we need to make sure that this is big enough to accommodate the text. I'm just going to start off by using 200, and we'll see if that works. I'm going to quickly make some rules for the additional areas that we have. So we have shark :target plus P. And for this one, if you remember, we had more paragraph content. We're just going to set the height to be auto for this. Auto is a great way if you don't know what the height is going to be. It will just automatically set to whatever it needs to be. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to use #turtle :target plus P. And let's set the height to be auto for that as well. In practice, we could really make the height auto for all of these. I just wanted to show you in some situations you might want to plug in a fixed value. So we'll have our first overview tab have a fixed value. The other two are going to remain at auto. Now, before we review the page, we're going to have to make one more rule inside of our paragraph tag. So inside the paragraph tag, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get rid of the height by using a height of 0. And let's add some padding to our paragraph that's inside this tab section. We'll just add an additional padding of 15 pixels on the right and left, 0 for the top. I'm going to change my overflow to hidden. This is going to ensure that all of the content is hidden. And if we save the page currently and look in our browser, you can see that now all of these items are collapsed. And if I click on any of these items, it's going to open the item accordingly. So we'll see the actual tabbed area and it will open as it is right here. Let's just make a couple of subtle changes. I'm going to actually change the section tag. So instead of having the gray, we're going to set that to white. And then my background color, I'm going to make this background color of my article A a little bit darker. So let me use EA, and we'll set this to be a little bit darker as well. I just realized that I have misspelled linear here. I'm missing an A in linear, so that's why my color is not showing up. Let me just fix that. That should be linear in both the article A and the article active. If we save now and we check this out in the browser, that looks a little bit better. So now when we click on these tabs, you can see that this whole section is going to be a slightly different color, which is what we want. And I think I have a couple more problems because when I'm actually hovering and clicking down, you can see how the background color is changing. I don't really want that to be there. And I also have a little bit of a spacing issue right here. So let's just make those adjustments. So it looks like I probably need to get rid of this margin on the bottom of my paragraph. I think that's creating that extra space. And also on our active, let's go ahead and let's not have this linear gradient. This article active is changing. This really should have been a article A active. So let's just make those changes. I think that will work a little bit better. Perfect. So now you can see the active tab is slightly dimmed out. The text is a little bit lighter, and now the colors are working in the way that we want them to. So now the functionality of this is working. The last thing that we want to do is simply add a little bit of CSS animation to have this be a little bit smoother in how it works. So I'm going to pass in a transition on the paragraph tag, and we're going to transition the property of height. We're going to have that happen in about half a second, and we're going to use ease out. And we're also going to transition the padding. Again, we're going to pass in a half a second, and we'll use ease out. Let's see what that looks like. If we refresh now, and we click on these, you can now see how I get a little bit of an animation where it looks like these things are sliding up and down as we click on the various elements. And maybe this needs to be just a little bit quicker. It seems like it needs to be a little bit snappier. So let's make the height happen in maybe 0.3, and the padding will change that as well. All right, I like that a little bit better. Okay, and as you can see, this is kind of a cool, pure CSS accordion type of view. And depending on the CSS that you style, you could have the tabs be all in one line and have these kind of opening and closing, or you can have them stacked on top of each other. But this is kind of a fun effect to add. It is a great save. It's a great space saver if you have a website where you're struggling to get all of the content appear in the space. So I hope you found this useful.